Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I can't believe I'm coming up in March on 2 years with this show. And I hope you've been with us for a good portion of it. And welcome back. And if this is new to you, we welcome you. I'm glad you joined us. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, and I am author of Getting It Right, Tangled Lies, and Reckonings. And my newest book is coming out this year. It's called True Grace, and it comes out in September. I'm like one of those one book a year people now, Bob? my guest today is my son, Robert C. Osborne, also known as Bob Osborne. Hey, Bob.
Hi, Mom.
And, you might have some of you probably just know Bob from his work, and we'll talk a little bit about the Osborne Group. But you also, those of you met him last year, 2021. He was one of my early guests, and we talked about different things. One of them is, how do you raise a reading and writing child? So if that's of interest to you, we have a nice discussion about that in the old one. But today we're going to talk a lot more about his short story writing journey. Bob is an award-winning short story writer, and he has several short stories out, some more coming. He's also a business owner, consultant, trainer, volunteer, husband, father. And our first question, we're going to start talking about reading, because you're just, you read the most amazing books. You're such a literary reader and writer. And we have lots of folks out there that don't just read popular books like me. So maybe you could help lift our reading a little bit and share. So first of all, start with what's in your to-read pile. What are you thinking about reading? What are you looking forward to reading?
Well, first, thanks for having me back on the show. What am I looking forward to reading? I don't know. I have a lot of lists a lot of books on my list, and I've sort of branched into. I've been taking recommendations from people, so I don't really know right now how good they are or how good they're going to be. So we'll have to see. But I think right now I'm reading The Passenger by Cormac McCarthy, and so
what's that about?
Good question. It's it's one for those of you who are familiar with Cormac McCarthy. Sometimes his books are very straightforward, like The Road, and and some of them are very ruminating. So I would say that this is more the ruminating kind of story, but it's about a brother and his sister, and their father was one of the inventors of the atomic bomb. And I think it's kind of about dealing with loss, and it's very existential, thinking about our place in this world and how to deal with grief and sorrow and the like. So it's interesting. I'm towards the end. I wouldn't say it's one of his best, but it's not. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. If you like Cormac McCarthy. If you don't like him, this probably isn't the book to start with. I would say you sort of have to know that you like him, I think, to like this book.
Okay. And do you have another one that you're reading or just read recently that you enjoyed?
So I was thinking about this question before I came on, and so yes, I think there was one book that I really liked this year. I think overall it wasn't a year for me that was amazing with books. There were all a lot of good books, but I didn't read any great books, I would say. Some years I read a lot of great books, but this wasn't one of them. But I think the book I enjoy the most is called Night of the Living Rez by Morgan Talty, and it's a collection of short stories. I wouldn't say that they're interlocking short stories, but they kind of circle the same theme, and so they definitely have a direction, and it definitely reaches a conclusion, even though they're not. It they're not strictly interlocking. There's not necessarily a clear narrative path, but more like a circular path around an idea. But they're very vibrant and interesting about reservation life, about tragedy and drug addiction, and
Mm.
I just, even though it's about those subjects, I just really enjoyed it. It's got a lot of energy and it's got a lot of life, and it rings really true.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I think that's probably the best book I read over the last year.
Mm. Do you write reviews?
No, no one's asked me to write a review. I was thinking, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was just thinking about that last night, because I was trying to think about, now that some of my stories have been published, like what do I want to get out of my writing, career, and my writing life, and to what extent does it fit in with what other writers do, and so, if you're a short story writer, most likely, or even a literary fiction writer, you teach, right? You teach at a university, or
Mhm.
this isn't your main job, right? You write reviews, you write essays, you write critiques, so I was just trying to think about, is that something that I would actually enjoy doing? I'm not sure that it would be. you know, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
But even if you just, I just love the words you use. That the stories have a lot of energy and a lot of life. It's not a way I read a lot of reviews, and it's not language that I hear, or that I see in the reviews. And what a wonderful thing to say about a writer's writing. So I just wondered if you took the time to write a reviews, even on, like, Amazon or Goodreads, or um, and then I bet there are people out there who would love to ask you to read their manuscript. I know you don't have a lot of time, but writing, reading, and then having, a blurb
Mhm.
for them on their books, it helps them, and just something to think about. Just
Yeah.
something to think
Well,
about. You write. I like your reviews, your spoken ones.
if someone asked me to do it, I would try it. I'm always willing to try something. I don't know. Again, I'm trying to kind of figure out what I have time for, and what this looks like for me, since I have a job. So this isn't going to be my job, and until I retire, I don't see a situation where I'd be teaching somewhere. So, what does this look like for me? And
Yeah, where's it going?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And besides, maybe I'm hoping to get invited to some good parties, but besides that.
Sounds good. Sounds really good. So many of our viewers are fellow authors. That they're an author like you are, and and I wanted to know if you could explain. You once explained it to me, so I think it would be wonderful to hear your thoughts about what are some of the basic differences between being somebody who writes short pieces versus somebody who writes longer pieces. The short story writer versus the novel writer, or the person who, yeah, in fiction, thinking about it from a fiction point of view. Could you share with us some of your thoughts about what those differences are?
Yeah. Well, I think there's big differences between the two. I think writing longer pieces is something that I'm still learning to do. So, as you know, I've done NaNoWriMo a few years, National November Writing Month, which is the month where you write, I think, about 2/3 of a manuscript.
Yeah,
Um,
50,000 words.
yeah. So I tried it again this year. In the past, I've just written 10 short stories. And then prior to that, I tried to write a novel, but it really turned out to be a decent novella. But
Mhm.
it wasn't a great novel, because I found that I kept repeating myself, and new things weren't happening. And then this time I tried, I had the pacing way, way off. So I think one big difference is a short story is really focused on like one idea, a couple of characters. It's very tight. There's nothing in the narrative that doesn't serve the narrative in a pretty specific sort of way. Whereas I think with a novel, you have subplots, you have major characters, you have minor characters, you have, you know, 3 acts, maybe more. And, you know, whereas in a short story, there has to be some kind of transformation, but there may or may not be any sort of, you know, the narrative arc is a very different narrative arc. And so I think they're very different. Like I don't understand the pacing of novels yet. I'm gonna work on it. I do think with short stories, I understand that and how to structure a short story around one idea. You know, but I think they're very, very different skills. Or not that, I mean, I hope that they're interchangeable, but I think, you know, it's like I wouldn't feel very confident learning to do a screenplay either, because I think that's different.
Different.
Yeah, you can learn it, but I haven't really learned novels in the way that I've learned short stories. I find short stories easier, but I know that other people find novels much easier. They need the space, whereas I find the space harder to deal with. It's a lot of space. It's a lot to work with.
Yeah, I've written so many short stories and I don't get any traction with them at all. And yet with my novels, you know, they're getting published, and I tried, and I remember you reading one of mine and you were saying, Mom, this isn't a novel. You know, that just from the story, it felt like something that should keep going on and on instead of a nice compact story. I love reading short stories, but I struggle with being able to write a good short story. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think some of my short stories are perfectly fine.
Okay.
But that's not what I want. Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's just a big difference in the pacing, you know. Like I just don't know what to fill. I don't know how to put all these pieces together into something that remains coherent. To me, that's much easier over a shorter space, because I can see the beginning and the end, where the novel, the end feels really, really far away for me. And I'm not quite sure how to navigate there. Now, I also, you know, I haven't dived into it the way that I have into short stories.
Short stories, yeah.
But,
So,
yeah, I know a lot of good short story writers and I'm on a writing group, and almost none of them are good novel writers. They're all really good writers. They're really good short story writers. They get published pretty regularly. They win awards. They win fellowships. But their novels are not great. They might get great, but they're not
there yet. Well, I'm hoping I'll get great at short story writing, and I think you'd write a great novel. So one of the other things you taught me, and I share this story a lot, is about rejection. You actually got me to stop crying over every rejection letter and quitting, you know, like, oh, I got 2 rejections. All right, I'm done, you know. And so you really got me to tough it out. And of course, that changed everything. That literally changed everything. It was so to the point where my newest novel that's coming out this year, my publisher bought it on a blurb. You know, so that advice you gave me. So I think it would be wonderful if you would share with our audience, and also those that are readers out there. I think that they would be interested in the pains that we go through, you know, to get a book, to get something out in the world. And you do a lot of querying. So tell us a little bit about your querying process and how you think about rejection, how you deal with rejection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think you have to embrace it, because either you can either own it, or you can be dejected and crushed, crushed by it. So when I was in college, friends, when they were applying for jobs, when they got rejections, they would take the rejection and post it on their door, and just to kind of own it, like they had to go through it. So they could either be ashamed about it or and sad about it, or they could just kind of own it for what it is. And so I really remember that when I started doing doing my own submissions to journals, that you have to embrace rejection. You're going to get rejected. In short stories, you're talking about a limited number of markets. You're talking about thousands and thousands of submissions for every market. You're talking about many of those submissions going to slots of agented writers, so established writers, at least the journals that I send into. But I think that's probably true almost anywhere. And or at least the ones that are considered prestigious. I mean, I think there's a lot of there's lots of places if you just want to get published, you can do that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, depending on what your goals are. But if you're kind of trying to get your novel sold and using short stories as a way to kind of establish yourself in the literary world, you have to send to certain journals, and there's a few hundred of them, but there's thousands and thousands of people that are submitting at any given time. And so you really have to accept the fact that you could have a great story and it's going to be rejected by almost everywhere, and it becomes kind of a volume business. And so I tell your story all the time when people get dejected, and how many times you got rejected before you got an acceptance. And this year I'm doing a rejection contest. We'll see who gets the most rejections. I'm losing because some people are sending theirs out to a lot of places, but I think that's the mentality you have to have. It's not that you're trying to get rejections, but it forces you to accept that that's part of this, and that you just have to send it out to a lot of places, and accept that you can be rejected. It doesn't mean that your story is bad. Like, I have a friend that I'm trying to convince her to stick with it, because she keeps tinkering every time she gets a few rejections from Oxford American or the Sun. I'm like, these are not easy places to get into. It doesn't mean anything is wrong with your story. It just means it doesn't fit. It's not what they're looking for. They may have a similar story that they like better. 5 of their short stories, maybe of the 6 that they're going to accept, may be agented. So you just have to embrace the rejection, be okay with it. It's okay to be sad about it. I'm not saying I'm not sad when it happens, but when I get rejected, I try to send something out immediately, just to kind of keep the hope.
Get back on the horse.
Like, wait, when they're out there, you can still believe that they might get accepted, and that kind of keeps it going.
Yeah. I after you and I had our talk, I set a goal of 100 rejections. Okay, I'm not really a writer unless I've had at least 100 rejections. And so I sort of like your contest, and pushed myself out there, and it really did work. It worked really well. So don't be afraid of rejections. Rejections are your friend. And also, you can't call yourself a writer unless you have some rejections, right?
I think so. I mean, I don't know any writer who doesn't get rejections. And you hear stories of well-known authors still getting rejected.
Yeah,
it's not a given that you're gonna sell your next thing, whatever it is.
I have a wonderful writer friend, Russell Rowland, and he had maybe 8 novels out, and then number 9, he couldn't get published. I mean, I thought to myself, my goodness, then there's no hope for us. This was before we had our talk. And I was like, this is like too discouraging. But he kept going, and now he's got a really good one out, Cold Country, that's doing really well. So you just have to tough it out. You have to tough it out, people. So tell us about, so now though, you have some successes, which is very nice. So tell us about what stories are recently out there, and who's coming up. And
let's see. So in like the last year or so, I was in Witness magazine, which is a good literary magazine, and that was their fiction 2022 fiction award. It was a finalist. So that came out in the fall.
And what was
That
the
was
name of the story?
it was called Children.
Yeah, it's a really good
And
story.
thank you. And then I have coming up, let's see, I have in the spring in the Southeast Review a story called Swing. And then in Obsidian in the fall, I have a story called Something So Beautiful. So
Mm,
two more coming
two
out.
more coming this year. And do you and you're are you still sending things out?
Yeah, I have two out right now that I'm, optimistic about, but I just start. Well, one of them's okay. One of them we'll see. But I don't know, maybe it's better than I think it is. I don't know. What I'm hoping. And then one I feel pretty good about, but is it gets such different reactions from different people that I'm not sure. Either it's really good or it's not. or it's bad.
You know, you
So,
mentioned a couple of times in this conversation about feedback. You said, and so, then the feedback I got, and then I heard from, so how do you use, just for our audience, what's the role of beta readers, of being part of a writing community where people exchange their writing? What does that do for the writer?
yeah, I mean, I think it's really necessary to have people who can read your writing and give you some insight. I mean, it's not that you can't do it yourself, but for me, I probably would have to let something sit 5 months before I could come to it as a reader and not as a writer again. I think Zadie Smith, I think it was, who had some quote around that. You have to come to your writing, um, your revisions, like as when you sat long enough that you are a reader, not a writer,
Not a
meaning you've
writer.
forgotten all about it and you can just take it in for what it is. But that's a really slow way of doing things, and you kind of have to do that anyway. But at least you can speed it up, I think, by having
Other people.
people critique and let you know whether this is good or bad or what's working and what's not working. Sometimes people will identify themes. I'm part of a pretty good writing group with people getting published pretty regularly. And so, I just wrote something over the last couple of weeks. I don't know if it's good or bad or even what it's really about. So I'm like, what do you think this is about? Let me know. And then I can kind of see what was standing, what the themes were that they see and what they like about it and what they think is strong about it and what they think is weak about it. And I can kind of figure out whether it's worth revising or not, and how to do it. So I think that's valuable. And I also am realizing that maybe the most valuable part of it is the business side of it, because I have gotten pretty good now, I think, about, and I have enough kind of readers, outside of these writing groups that I feel like it might be slower, but I feel like I could get there on my own. But I think the business side is also something that's useful. These are all folks trying to do the same thing. They're letting me know about fellowships and contests and deadlines and how to think about things and parties and all the things that kind of are useful to a writer or fun for a writer. So I think, and then it's just lonely. It's very
Yeah.
solitary business. And even when you get published in these journals, like, I don't know, I mean, how many people are reading this, some of these journals? I don't know, but a few.
A
Some
few,
of them
because
more
they're
than
still in
others.
business.
Yeah, some of them more than others. And they're the people that I would like to be reading it. There are other writers and other people who write the same things that I do. And but it's solitary, so it's nice, I think, to have people. I mean,
Yeah. So
that's what you're doing
offline,
here, right? Creating a community
a
of
community, that's exactly right. Offline, I want to hear about the parties. But, but before we go, I would like you to just briefly tell our audience about your other life, because you own a business and you're fitting your writing in, with family, yes, but also running an international business. So could you just tell everybody briefly what you do?
I am a fundraising consultant, much like you were in your previous incarnation. And so, yeah, we do fundraising and management consulting for a wide variety of organizations nationally and internationally. So we're capacity builders, and we help people, fundraise and manage their organizations strategically and hit strategic goals. So that's
Yeah.
my day job. But I do, I do try hard to find time to write. I try to write at least 15 minutes every day, and I actually find that it uses, like, it's not that difficult because it uses such a different part of my brain that I actually find that it makes work
Mm,
easier, because it's almost like resting that,
that
I
other
forget which side
part.
of the
Oh,
left
that's
side of that
interesting.
button. Yeah, it's like I'll feel better at the end of the day writing for a little bit. It'll kind of let me get past the work part of my day. It doesn't feel like another thing that I'm doing. It feels like, yeah, that it helps. It makes it easier to do my job.
That's cool. That's interesting. Well, thank you. And thank you guys. If you want to find out more about Robert Osborne, they can find you at, where can they find you?
Right now, it's just on Twitter and Instagram at Bob Osborne 17. I'm working on, one of my writing goals for this year is to have a writing or author site up, but I haven't done it yet. But it's coming soon. But for now, it's at Bob Osborne 17, and you can
And you
find me
can,
on LinkedIn too.
so LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram.
Yeah, mostly Instagram. I really don't use Twitter very often.
Yeah. And there, lots of people are rethinking that too. But that's another topic for another time. Thank you so much, all of you, for listening. And I hope you will join us again. I hope you will follow Bob. I hope you will follow me on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and on my Facebook and YouTube. And that you will join us again on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.